A lot of woodworkers like making things out of pallets, and can you really blame them? I mean, with the cost of wood, pallets are a great source of basically free wood. You know, in the 50 years I've been doing woodworking, wood prices have gone up and up and up. And so I really understand the idea of making things out of pallets. Now, I don't make a lot of things out of pallets myself, but it's mostly because of the type of stuff I make. Pallets are really something, if you're going to make something that's maybe a little more rustic. And really what you're trying to do is take advantage of the weathering of the wood. So you're really going to be looking at what does the wood look like that you're using. Now, of course, the first question is, where am I going to get pallets from, right? Well, pallets are used to ship goods by truck, and so anytime you get manufacturers shipping things to wholesalers and wholesalers shipping things to retailers, there's a good chance that pallets are involved. So that's the places to look. Now, don't bother going to Walmart or Home Depot and looking for them. The really big outlets like that probably are recycling their pallets back to their vendors, okay? Matter of fact, Walmart has their pallets painted a particular color so that they can be readily identified, and if anybody's got them, it's obvious that it's one of their pallets. Probably the same thing can be said for your local grocery store, okay? Well, so we come down a little bit lower than that, and we get some pretty good sized stores, and they get pallets in, but they go through them, and they're probably selling them to a pallet recycler. And those are companies that get used pallets, and they'll sort them out, and they'll sell them off to manufacturers or to wholesalers for reuse. And pallets are intended to be usable multiple times. But then you get down to smaller stores or even smaller wholesalers, and you'll find that, yeah, they get some pallets in, but they're not big enough that they've got to deal with a wholesaler, or they've got to deal with shipping back to their place of origin, and so they probably get a few pallets stacked up around their back door. You know, my favorite place to look is those places where it's like kind of like a strip mall, except for it's wholesalers. You've got a warehouse in back and an office in front, and there might be 6, 7, 10, 20 of them lined up in a row. And generally speaking, you go out back, you can find a few pallets here and there and start collecting them. And some people collect a lot of them that way. Now, another real good source for pallets is to go to one of the pallet recyclers. Now, they'll have their pallets separated and graded. They'll have the really good ones, like the oak ones. They'll have some that are not as good, but then they'll get pallets in that are not reusable. They're busted. And those usually stack up and get turned into scrap. Well, a lot of times you can get them to give you those pallets for nothing or almost nothing. And that's a really good source for pallets as well. Now, of course, once you get the pallets, you've got to turn them into usable wood, okay? There's a couple problems with that. One is dirt, and we'll talk about how to deal with that in a minute, but the other is the nails they use to put them together. These are put together with what are known as spiral shank nails. And it's the same kind of nails that are actually used when you're putting in flooring by hand, okay? It's kind of halfway between a nail and a screw. It's got a twist to it, almost a thread, although it really isn't a screw thread. And it's intended to make it so it doesn't come apart easily. So taking pallets apart is not an easy operation. A lot of guys will just tackle with a crowbar, but one of the easiest things to do is cut off the ends so you don't have any of those nails, and that just leaves you the nails in the middle. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I've set up a bar here. You could use just a piece of wood for this. And I'm going to take my mini circular saw and go ahead and cut this off. Okay, that's the first time I ever tried doing that with a mini circular saw. I'll have to say it's easier with a full-size circular saw. Now, what a lot of people will do once they've cut the ends is they'll go ahead and pry the middle apart, but again, you still have the same problem with the same screws, okay? So we can do the same thing cutting. It really depends on how long of pieces you need. The design I'm going for, I can get by with pieces that are 15 inches long. And so I'm going to go ahead and cut the inner part here to get all these pieces off of here. You may be asking the question, why am I using a circular saw to do this instead of something like a Sawzall? Well, a lot of people would use a Sawzall. The only problem is you'll get a lot of splintering on the ends if you use a Sawzall. I'm getting actually a neater cut. I'm getting less wasted wood this way, even though it's a little harder to work with. Okay, so I now have here a couple pallets worth of wood pieces that I've cut. And I honestly don't know if this is enough for what I'm intending to do with it. I can always cut another pallet if I need to. But let's see how far I get with this. And the next thing I need to do is I need to clean this and grade it. And when I'm talking about grading it, I'm not talking about grading it like they do with lumber from a sawmill. I'm talking about grading what kind of condition it's in and how I can use it. Biggest thing I'm concerned with there is, does it have any nails in it? Like this piece right here has some nails in it, okay? Does it have splits in it, like this piece? And is it flat? My biggest concern is if it's flat. So I'm going to do two things here at the same time. I'm going to take each board and I'm going to go over it with a wire brush. And the purpose of this is just to get rid of loose dirt, okay? Because that loose dirt is going to mess up the blades of saws and planers. Now I realize that I've already cut this wood once using a circular saw with a carbide tip blade in it, but it was an old blade, okay? So that's it. That piece is clean, and we can, well, helps to get rid of some of the sawdust that's in the way. And we can see that it's pretty flat, okay? That's good. That's a good piece. Now here's another piece. So we clean some of this off. And this particular piece has got a lot of character to it. And what I mean by character is that this side has got a lot of decay. Now it looks really cool, okay? But it all depends on the design you're going for and whether or not you want that decay, okay? It's also got a little bit of a twist in it, not real bad. I can push it down and make it flat, so it's probably usable in that sense. But, okay, so this might be a piece I want to use as an accent piece somewhere because of that decay. So it's really in a different category than that piece is, okay? And this is what I'm going to go through all these pieces, getting rid of loose dirt, and deciding which piece, you know, what kind of conditioner each piece is. One of the great things about working with this is look at this. We got this nice silvered piece of wood here, and then we got this one that's kind of a charcoal color, okay? And that's one of the beauties of working with this is you get some really nice effects in the wood. Now this piece is pretty flat. It's pretty good. Now another thing you should really be thinking about while you're looking at that is which side of this board am I going to use, okay? In this particular case, that silvered side is definitely the side to use rather than this side. Oh, that side looks good too. In this case, I would say this side looks better than that side. You know, this one, if I'm going to use this at all, I'm probably going to use that weathered side because that's why I would be using it. So as you're going through this process, you might want to take a marker and just put an X on what's going to be considered the back side of the pieces, just so you don't have to do this again, okay? Here's another nice silvered piece that's kind of flat, okay? So we're going to use the silvered side of that one. Here's an interesting piece here. It's got a knot hole in it. It's a little chewed up on the edges. Silver on this side. Gosh, this has got a lot going for it, this particular piece of wood. You know, we're after rustic here, so what would normally be considered flaws may not necessarily be flaws. That's actually a really pretty piece of wood. And it's definitely the silver side that's the prettier side, so we're gonna mark that one accordingly. So I'm gonna go through this whole stack this way. You know, and then some of these pieces, like this piece here, this is almost looks new on one side, but the other side's got this dent in it. All right, so the question then is, do I want to use that dent as a design feature? Maybe somewhere in my table, okay? Or is it something that I'm gonna say, no, I'm not gonna use it because of that? But then again, this piece has got some bad twist in it, so that might be a problem. So that's what I'm looking at as I go through all these pieces. Okay, so I've taken my wood that I cut and I ran it through the planer just one side, because what I was trying to do is make sure that I have consistent thickness. These slats, you can't count on them to be consistently thick. Now, not all of them are usable. I've got a whole stack of them over here that are twisted badly and they're not usable, okay? I've also got a bunch of pieces that got splits in them. Now, a lot of people would remove the splits. They'd either cut them off or just not use those pieces. I'm going to leave them in because I'm going for a rustic look. Now let's talk about look for a moment here, because really a lot of this is about the look. One of the really great things about working with pallet wood is that you get a large variety of appearances. And those appearances come from the difference in the wood and the aging and the weathering and all that. If we look at what I've got here, and these are the pieces that I think are usable, okay? I've got some pieces that are red oak. I've got some pieces that I'm pretty sure are poplar. I don't know of any other wood that's that color. I've got some pieces here. I have no idea what they are, but they got some really great figuring in them. Then I've got one piece here I'm pretty sure is maple, which really surprises me. And then I've got pieces that are probably some variety of pine. And you notice I've got some of them sitting with the weathered side up and some of them sitting with the clean side up. Originally, I was going to do this all weathered side, but as I planed these, I saw that, oh, hey, I've got some different colors here I can mix. So what I'm probably going to do is do a combination where I've got, you know, maybe something like this, where I've got a piece of oak with a silvered piece here, you know, and then maybe a piece of this poplar, and just mix the woods together, because really that's a lot of what our design is about, is getting those contrasts. And if you look at any table made out of pallet wood, that's really what you end up seeing. Now, a lot of people would only use the plain side. They would not use the weathered side, okay? It really depends on personal preference. There's a lot of decisions you make in this process that are all about what is it that you want? What is your personal preference? What's the look you're trying to get out of it? This is going to go on my patio, so I like the idea of some weathered looking pieces, and I'll probably coat it with something like maybe a flood coat of epoxy or something to protect it and maintain that, although I may use varnish too. I really haven't decided that. Now, the other thing a lot of people do is get rid of cracks, okay? Like this piece of oak here has got a crack in it, and I'm going to go ahead and use those pieces with the cracks. I'm not going to throw that away. I'm not going to cut it out. Again, because I'm going for this weathered sort of look. Here I've got a piece of oak with a knot hole in it, okay? I'm toying with the idea of filling some of the bigger cracks with epoxy, colored epoxy. I haven't decided on that yet. And nevertheless, that'll be done after putting it all together. So that'll be more in the finishing stage. I really haven't decided about that. But there's a lot of different things you can do, and you've got to really think through. It's not just a haphazard thing, although it often looks haphazard. The idea is that you're really thinking through what is it that I want to do in my design. And again, it's all about getting those contrasts to come out, because that's what makes this kind of furniture beautiful. So as far as design, what I'm going to do is here's my substrate. Now, anytime you're working with pallet wood, you're always going to be on a substrate of some sort. This stuff isn't going to hold together. I can't edge glue this and expect to get a good tabletop, okay? Even though I've cut the edges cleanly so that they'll butt up close, I really wouldn't want to try and glue this together as an edge glue tabletop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do sort of a herringbone design. I'm going to go to a 30-degree angle here, and then, you know, the opposite on this side. That's a fairly common style. Some people go straight, some people go that way. But regardless of what you do, you're going to work on some sort of a substrate. I've seen people use a spool, like those big cable spools, and they'll go the pallet wood on top of that. And that looks really nice for a patio table if that's what you want. Okay? I'm using a piece of 3/4-inch plywood, so I've got a solid substrate to work with. No one's going to see that unless they lay down underneath and look at the bottom side of the table. They're going to see this pallet wood, because that's the decorative part. But you've got to have something solid for it all to attach together. Now, there's another thing we've got to consider here is, since this is going to be a table, and I'm doing a coffee table, which will be about 18 inches high, I need to be able to attach legs to it. And that normally means, unless you're going to go with a pedestal leg of some sort, that means putting a table skirt on it. So really, before I put that on, I need to put the table skirt on so I can come through the top side to the pieces I'm going to use for the table skirt. So since we're going for this weathered look, I found a piece of 2x8 that I've got sitting out there. I've got a wood outside that's just weathered wood. It's either old, it's left over from projects, it's stuff that I never got around to putting away properly. Some of it was here when I bought the house. So here's a nice chunk of nicely weathered 2x8. And I'm going to cut this into strips, and that's going to become my skirting. I'm going to have the weathered side visible, okay? So that'll go well with my weathered slats from the pallet. I'm going to miter the corners, even though they'll probably separate after time. This wood is pretty dry, and so I'm really not worried much about shrinkage, but I'm going to go ahead and miter the corners, and I'm going to put this together so that I've got my skirting on there, and then I'll go ahead and put the slats on. Okay, so here's my pieces for my skirting. I've essentially cut 2x2s, which is a really weird shape for skirting. Usually it'd be like a 1x3 or a 1x4 or even a 1x2. Okay, 1x3 would probably be the most common size. The reason I've done what I've done is that I want to use the weathered side out, okay? And since I was working from a 2x, this was the most sensible way of doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and glue and nail this together, and then I'm going to attach it to the bottom side of my panel here. Now, somebody out there watching this is going to say, what does he think he is doing gluing end grain? Doesn't he know that end grain isn't strong, gluing isn't strong? And here's my answer to that person, okay? Yeah, I know it's not strong. But I also know end grain gluing is stronger than not gluing. Okay, so no, it's not as strong as gluing with the grain by any means. I won't claim that. But it's stronger than not using any glue at all. So it may just be that little bit that's necessary to keep everything together. And if it's not, well, I wasted a little bit of glue. So by the way, this is not the normal way to do skirting, okay? If you're building like a dining room table, you would probably not attach it directly with screws, as I'm going to. What you would probably do is use clips to allow for expansion and contraction. My thinking here again is that this is a rustic piece of furniture, and so I'm really not concerned if I end up with it a little bit off, okay? So this now is going to go on the bottom side. You notice I've done it in such a way that my weathering is facing out, okay? My clean sides are towards the board and hanging out in space. So let's see here. I guess I should measure this first. This is 14 inches, and this is 20 inches, okay? So I actually made it a little smaller than I intended to. So I need to come 3 inches in on the sides, 32 and 36, and I need to come 2 inches in on the ends. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. Now my major concession here, the issue of expansion and contraction of the lumber, is that I'm not gluing the top to the skirting frame, okay? So this is 3 inches in. So if I go 3.5 inches in, I know I'm going to hit it right on the button. Okay, here on this side, if I go 2.5 inches in, okay, so now they are attached together, and I'm ready to go on to working with my slats there to put the design onto it. Okay, so this is where we get to start having fun. We're going to be a little selective with our woods and what we've got to try and make a really nice pattern. And what I've done is picked 4 pieces here. 3 narrower ones and 1 wider one. And I've gone ahead and cut them off at a 60-degree angle, which is going to give me the angle I want here for my design, okay? Here's a piece of oak, and I've got some discoloration in it. I haven't planed that all the way off. Here's the other side of that piece of oak, really nicely silvered. This is just a piece of, it looks like pine. It's rather weathered. There's a nice knot hole in here. Another nice knot hole in this. I'm not sure what this is, but it might even be a piece of maple. It's definitely a hardwood. You got some beautiful grain in it. And then just this piece, and this piece actually was split and I glued it back together. And this again is probably pine. So this is my first pieces. Now, I'm not going the entire quadrant. What I'm doing is getting the angled pieces in. I'm gonna do that all the way around and then come back and fill in my little triangles, okay? So to make this easier, I've gone ahead and put a fence here, so I'm working up to that. And this nail here, if you can see it, that's just for your reference. That's my absolute center. And I'm gonna go ahead and draw, give myself a line. I'm just using a drafting triangle here, so I know where this piece goes, in other words, so I don't put glue down beyond that point, okay? I'm gonna be both gluing and nailing this, and actually the nails are there more as a clamp to hold the pieces down while the glue is setting, okay? And so if we follow our pattern through, our last piece ends up not quite filling it in, so I'm going to draw that little triangle line in too, so I'm putting glue over there, okay? All right, so let's get some glue on here. I have a bit of a tendency to go light on the glue, but I definitely don't want to go light here because I don't want this coming unglued even a little bit and start allowing the weather and warping of the wood to make this come apart. So I want 100% glue coverage. Okay. So I've set my first piece in here. I'm going to go ahead and nail it. I'm using wire brads for this. I want to get everything snug. I don't want a lot of gaps. I've got enough gaps with the cracks that are in the wood that I've decided to keep. Okay, so there's that. Now you notice we're overhanging here, and what I'm going to do is after I get all the top in, then I will use the edge of this piece of wood as a guide to go ahead and cut the excess off here. Right now we're just going to leave that there. So now I need to select my pieces for this side so that I can cut this side. Again, I'm going to give myself my angle here. Now, if you don't have a drafting triangle like this, you can do the exact same thing with a speed square. You don't need to buy a drafting triangle, do something like this. Or you can do it 45, which is, you know, a natural angle with a speed square. So let's see, what do I want to use? Now, I've got this wood here, which kind of looks like poplar, and I like it. So I think I'm going to put that as my first piece here. Now, I've got a gap here, so this won't be right next to that oak. And then a dark piece. Well, there's this. This is kind of crazy. Well, those three pieces will pretty much take care of, except for a little triangle here, and of course our middle triangle here. So I'm going to go and cut these off at 60 degrees so I can put these in. When I set up my miter gauge on my saw, I didn't trust the scales on the miter gauge because it's just not fine enough. I used a digital protractor to do this. Now, this is a really big digital protractor. It's got a 12-inch scale, but in reality, it's more like 14 inches long. I have a smaller 7-inch one, but I use this one because I'm just trying to make sure I get as much contact as possible with the blade and with the fence that's on my miter gauge to set it so that I've got a 120 degree angle. So that 120 degree angle I used to cut these, and then for this, rather than reset it, all I did was flip them over when I cut it. See, there's the same cut, but this is actually going to go on this side, okay? So that eliminates the problem of resetting the saw all the time. Got a little bit of pencil mark on here I'm going to get rid of. There we go. Okay, so I'm ready to put these pieces in this side. Set them in place. I love this knot hole, the grain here. I'm really looking for something that gives me a real design here, okay? I'm using knot holes here, I'm using knot holes here. Whatever is going to give me the most interesting look rather than just a plain look, okay? Again, I've got my 2 lines, so I'm ready to put my glue in there. You can spread your glue however you want. I usually use my finger, but because of the larger surface area here, I'm using a roller. A lot of people will use a brush. Brushes work great. The nice thing about a roller is that it's easier to clean it up and reuse it. Brushes, to me, if you're using brushes for spreading glue, you're planning on throwing the brush away. You don't necessarily have to, but cleaning them up is a hassle. Roller cleans up really easily. And the residue, if I don't manage to get it 100% cleaned up, well, that'll dry in place and just peel off. Okay, so again, I'm using my line that I made for lining this up. So between that line and my fence here, I'm getting this in exactly the position I want it. Now, obviously, a larger table would require a lot more pieces, okay? And you could do a lot more variety in your design. A lot more playing around with the coloration of the wood. It's just that I'm doing a small one for 2 reasons. One, where I'm planning on using it, this is the size I need. And number 2, if I try and do a big one, it's harder to get it on camera. Okay, so I've got these 2 sides. Now I'm going to flip it around so I can do those 2 sides, and then we'll deal with these little triangular pieces that are left. Okay, and so now we've got all 4 of our quadrants basically filled in, but we've got these 2 triangle pieces here and here on the end that we've got to fill in. And this is a little trickier than cutting these because you can't cut an angle like that on a table saw, at least not using your miter gauge. Now you could using a tapering jig, but my tapering jig is not wide enough to handle this piece of wood. So what I did is that I drew my line, I laid the piece in here, drew the line, and I cut it on the bandsaw, and then took it over to the belt sander to just clean up the edge, okay? So that, and I did the same thing for the other piece. So I've got these 2 mating pieces here, and this is not perfect. There's still another little triangle on them to do, but I kind of need to get these pieces in place to be able to do that. And then I'll be doing that essentially the same way I'm doing these. So, back to our glue and our roller. And try to avoid doing what I just did and putting the glue in the wrong spot. Okay, so now I need to cut myself one other little piece to fit in here, which I think I'll cut out of probably this right here. What I'm doing is trying to line my straight edge, my triangle here up with my seam, okay, so I can there we go. Okay, a little bit of glue here. And will this work for that final spot? Yes, it will. So. Okay, so now I need to do the same thing on the other side and on these corners. and then we'll trim off the ends and we'll actually have our tabletop. When I attached the pieces of pallet wood to my baseboard, I left the ends hanging off, and the main reason for that is that's just the easiest way to make sure I get it nice and neat. If I try and cut each one to fit, I'll end up, getting it off somewhere. So what I need to do now is get rid of this excess. We'll just trim that off with a circular saw. Now, there's a couple ways you can go about this, and I've seen people use jigsaws, and I've seen people use circular saws, I've seen people use track saws, and a lot of people will flip it over and work from the bottom side, which is what I'm doing. I've gone ahead and put a piece of just 1x2 here, and this is just sitting here as a support from my saw, because most of the weight of my saw is going to be off the edge here. Okay, so that's the support. And I'm actually not going to cut right up flush to the plywood. I'm going to cut a little bit out, 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch. Now I'm going to go back with a pattern bit that you would use in a router, like if you were trying to cut out something to a particular shape. And I'm going to use the plywood here as the pattern to bring the edges of my slats right up to that. So let's go ahead and cut it. Okay, I've got a pattern bit chucked up in my trim router, and I've got the depth set so that the bearing is going to sit right on the plywood here, and it's going to cut just the slats. I've gone ahead and propped up the whole tabletop a little bit on some blocks so I don't tear up my workbench, and you can still see what I'm doing. So chances are pretty good my battery is going to go dead before I get done, so I've got a spare battery here. And let's give this a shot. Well, there's two sides. I'm sure you noticed I was going the wrong direction part of the time there. It's a little tricky because we're going cross grain, okay? And remember, all our pieces are coming at an angle, and so we're really dealing with the end grain. But the biggest concern isn't that. The biggest concern is making sure that the base of your router stays flat on the board. If it tips, then what's going to end up happening, and it can very easily do that because there's nothing supporting the other side over there, you'll end up getting an undercut, and then when you flip it over, you're going to find you're going to have edges that are uneven and chamfered a bit. So I've managed to trim all the way around, but I've had a couple problems, specifically where my triangles coming together on the middle of the sides. I've had some pieces break off. Not a big surprise, nevertheless not welcome. So in this case, I've got the actual piece that came out, so I'm going to go ahead and glue it back in there, and then I'll hand trim it with a small saw. I'm just using cyanoacrylate adhesive for this more because it's just the easiest way to do it. And then like this one here, I doubt I can find that piece, so what I'll have to do is take from my scrap that fell on the floor here when I was cutting everything off and find a piece that I can cut and fit in there. But those types of things happen. Fortunately, this particular type of a design hides things like that well, because we've got a lot of colors and grains here already. Adding another little piece in that's an oddball piece really doesn't make a difference. All I've got left to finish up my table is put some legs on, and I've decided to go with a pretty simple design on this. I played around with a lot of different ideas, and either I didn't have enough pallet wood left to do them, or I just, the idea was more work than I wanted to do, actually. So I've just got some essentially 2x2s that I've cut. And this was off of that same piece of wood that I cut these out of, actually. So it's weathered, notice, on 3 sides, but I got one side that's not weathered, unfortunately. And I try and hide that towards the inside, but I know it's not going to remain well hidden. So what I'm going to end up having to do is eventually, I'm going to have to do some staining here, and actually probably not before too long, to try and clean that up. So this is actually going to be used as essentially a coffee table on my patio. And coffee table height is 18 inches. So I've got 1.5 inches of thickness here, so the legs are 16.5 inches long. There we go, there's the angle I want. And I got some messed up nails, not good. Now the other thing I'm going to do to add a little more stability here, I've got these crossbars which give me stability this way. I want a little stability this way. So these are just some little offcuts that I'm going to put in here that will give it some ability. It's got stability from being pushed out because of the skirt here, but from being pushed in, this will give me a little more strength. And I just did that wrong. I want to do this so that the weathered side is to the outside. More like that. And these will just get nailed in as well. Mostly the glue holding them in. Okay. So now I've got to just take care of my nails that bent. So here's my finished table. Now, one thing about this type of woodworking is that you can do pretty much anything you want. Pallets are very versatile, not only in their color, but just in the types of things you can do with them. Now, I mentioned before that some people do this onto a cable spool. I've seen people do it onto other things. So it really depends on what you want. You know, the one key thing is trying to get your pattern to vary, get your colors to vary, and make sure you've got a good solid substrate to do it on. Never try and do anything with pallet wood without something solid to hold it together. I've got a fairly solid table here. It's wiggling just a little bit, and even with the minimum amount of bracing I put on my legs, and this will be a nice little coffee table on my deck. So what is it you want, or what is it you need a table for? This may not be the thing for your dining room or your kitchen, but if you need a casual table somewhere, this is a great style. And one of the nice things about it is you don't necessarily have to be worried about how well finished it is. You notice I haven't put anything on my edges here. That's very typical for these tables. Now, if it was up to me, I'd probably put some sort of edging on here. Problem is I don't have anything that'll look good, okay? Everything I've got's new wood, and the stuff that I've got that's old wood I've used. So I may later add something on. I do need to apply some sort of finish on it to protect it, because otherwise I'm going to lose this great combination of colors. It's all going to weather and it's all going to look the same eventually. So I need to put something that's going to be waterproof and provide some ultraviolet resistance to it. And as I said, I'm thinking about epoxy. I haven't decided on that. I may just go with a good spar varnish, okay? Now, if you're going to varnish it, go with a spar or marine varnish rather than a polyurethane varnish, because they're designed to handle the weather, okay? So it's not a hard project to do, but you end up with something that looks beautiful, it'll impress your friends and neighbors, and it'll be useful for your family. So why don't you grab a few pallets, make some sawdust, and make yourself a table too.